I was putting on my coat when I learned my own son was trying to erase me from existence. Not metaphorically, legally. The wool of the blazer I'd worn every Sunday for 15 years, pressed and still smelling faintly of cedar from the closet, suddenly felt like a straitjacket. One moment, I was tightening my tie in front of the mirror, checking my collar for lint like some sitcom dad on autopilot. The next, my phone buzzed. A single line on the lock screen. Call me now. Do not go to your son's house. It was from Ron, my lawyer of 20 years. A no-nonsense Vietnam vet turned estate litigator. The kind of guy who once told a judge, "With respect, Your Honor, that's horse crap." I called. He picked up before the first ring finished. No greeting, just breathing, and then. "They filed it. Behind your back. I emailed you the scanned copy. Do not go to dinner." I opened the email. PDF, 2 pages. The subject line read, "Emergency petition for medical guardianship. Filed jointly by my wife, Catherine, and my son, Matt. Signatures. A checkbox. Mental incapacity suspected due to progressive cognitive decline. Proposed guardian, Matthew S. Langston. My son." I sat down on the bench beside the coat rack, staring at the words like they were written in some ancient language I had to decipher to keep breathing. Catherine's voice called from the car outside. "Honey, are you coming? We'll be late." "Yeah, late. For my own funeral, apparently." Before I go on, if you've made it this far, take a second and subscribe. Most people listening to these stories never do, but it helps the team keep digging into stories like mine. Trust me, what's coming deserves to be heard. I didn't answer her. I just kept staring at that form. The cold efficiency of the language. The casual malice. The way they ticked boxes to describe me like a malfunctioning appliance. Suddenly, 100 little moments I'd ignored, or laughed off, came rushing back. The missing prescriptions. Catherine double-checking the oven for me. Matt asking if I needed help managing the business credit cards. The family attorney meetings I hadn't been invited to in months. The memory that hit hardest was 2 weeks ago, when Catherine walked in while I was halfway through balancing the quarterly ledger, squinted at the spreadsheet, and said, "You still do all that by hand? That's so sweet." She kissed me on the head. "You know, maybe Matt should help with this next time. Just so you don't overdo it. Just so I don't overdo it." This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment ambush. This was a campaign. Quiet. Long surgical. Ron's voice brought me back. "We can still fight it. But you need to cancel dinner. If you show up there, they're expecting to document erratic behavior. Probably have a court-appointed observer lined up to witness it. Anything you say, any confusion, even raising your voice, it's all ammo. They're trying to trap me. They're trying to bury you, Ed. I've seen this before. A guardianship petition like this, once accepted, gives your son full control over all assets. Home, accounts, trusts, medical decisions, everything." My stomach turned. Do they know I've seen this? Not yet, but they will. Outside, the car honked once. Cheerfully, I stood slowly, took off my coat, and hung it back on the rack. Catherine had baked a casserole for this. Matt probably rehearsed his lines. My daughter-in-law, who never looked me in the eye anymore, was probably setting the table. This wasn't a dinner. It was an execution, and I had just walked away from the gallows. The lies didn't start with paperwork. They started with kindness. That's the part that messes with you the most. It wasn't an attack. It was a drip. A gentle, endless drip. Until one day you wake up and you're soaking wet, wondering why your skin feels cold and your name is no longer yours. It began with Matt, my son, calling more often. Not the casual, "How's the lawn doing?" or "Did you catch the game?" kind of calls. These were purposeful, measured. Every conversation twisted subtly toward one subject. "Dad, have you checked on your retirement accounts lately? I could help organize things a little better. You've got a lot spread out. 401k, mutuals, the business trust. You've done an amazing job, don't get me wrong. Just saying it might help to simplify." Simplify. Translation, let me put my hands on the wheel. I remember the first time Catherine chimed in. We were sitting in the living room. Fire was going. She had that cardigan on. The one with the pearl buttons she only wore when she wanted to play the part of the gracious, doting wife. "You know," she said, "I think you've been more forgetful lately. Just little things. Names. Dates. You missed your dentist appointment last week, remember?" "I rescheduled it," I said. "It's on the fridge." "Well," she replied gently, with a smile that now curdles in my memory, "Matt just worries. So do I. That's all." It felt innocent. And maybe part of me, some scared, prideful, aging part, wanted to believe I was just being a stubborn old goat resisting help. But now I see it. Every gentle suggestion was a knife, slipped between the ribs with a pat on the back. There were odd, legal prep sessions they started attending together. Matt said it was about his will, for the grandkids' sake. I asked once if I should join, just to stay in the loop. Catherine patted my hand. Oh no, darling. Just boring forms and insurance stuff. You'd hate it. The next week, our estate attorney stopped answering my calls. Passwords began changing. At first I thought I'd just forgotten them. Then I started noticing that the password hints had changed too. Instead of first car or wedding song, the hint was suddenly something like Jasper, the name of my son's dog. A dog I never liked. Then came the pharmacy slip-up. I take statins and a mild blood pressure pill. Always have. Same dosage for a decade. I noticed one of the bottles felt different, lighter. When I checked the refill log, it showed a doubling of the dosage on the prescription, without my doctor's name attached. I confronted Catherine. She shrugged. You probably just forgot. You've been tired lately. Honestly, I think stress is making you paranoid. That word, paranoid, it stuck in my throat like poison ivy. I even wrote it down in my notebook. I keep one in the kitchen drawer, old habit from my early management days. The page read, paranoid equals setup? Check bottle. Talk to Ron. I never did. I didn't want to feel crazy. Now I flip through that same notebook like it's evidence. Every scribble, every correction, every entry written with my own hand. Proof that I wasn't losing it. That the man they painted as mentally slipping was more present than either of them ever realized. At Sunday dinners, I remembered how Matt would glance at his wife and then suddenly pivot the conversation toward plans for the future. Retirement. Estate simplification. Don't you think, Dad, that we should all sit down soon and map out responsibilities? You know, just in case. Just in case of what? They weren't asking out of love. They were staging a transition, quietly sliding me out of the frame. The part that keeps me awake now isn't the betrayal. It's how reasonable they made it all sound. How they wrapped theft in concern. How Catherine could hand me a plate of roast beef while suggesting I might need a part-time assistant for the family firm. She smiled so much during those months. Like a politician campaigning for office in a town she already owned. Even the house felt different. The thermostat automatically adjusted, always just a few degrees too cold. My favorite recliner, moved without asking, then quietly replaced with one easier on your back. As if I were being transitioned from husband to hospice patient. And all the while, I nodded. I let it happen. Because it's hard to believe your own family is planning your disappearance. Especially when they keep tucking you in at night. Ron's office smelled like lemon oil and slow decay. The kind of place where secrets had dust and coffee rings on them. He slid the guardianship petition across the desk with one hand and pointed at a folder in the other. That one's yours. You'll want to pay very close attention to paragraph 17. I opened it, not sure what I was expecting. A condolence? A strategy? Maybe just confirmation that my world was crumbling in an orderly, notarized fashion. But what I found wasn't a death sentence. It was a loaded weapon they hadn't realized they'd handed me. The folder contained the updated version of the Langston Family Trust. 2 years ago, after my health scare, just a scare, no long-term damage, I'd gone into full succession planning mode. I brought Ron in to tighten up the legalese, scrub old clauses, and add one little parachute I didn't even tell Catherine about. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't like how comfortable Matt was getting with power. The clause was simple, buried deep, almost deliberately boring. In the event that the primary trustee is declared medically unfit, all fiduciary authority and voting rights within Langston Holdings LLC shall transfer immediately to alternate trustee, Ms. Marianne K. Den. My sister-in-law, a licensed CPA with a spine of titanium. My late brother's widow. No ties to Matt. No allegiance to Catherine. The kind of woman who read every page of a document before touching a pen. I sat back. They don't know about this, do they? Ron gave a small grin. They read the 2009 version. That one did transfer rights to Catherine. The 2021 update? You filed it after the appendectomy. Quietly. They probably didn't even know you came in. They based their entire coup on the wrong damn version. They underestimated you, he said. Which, for people this manipulative, is a rookie mistake. I rubbed my face. Fear was still there, cold and damp, but something new was forming beneath it. Leverage. If they succeeded in getting me declared mentally unfit, their plan would backfire so fast it'd slap the smirk off Matt's face. Instead of gaining control, Catherine would lose everything. Every share, every vote, every dollar tied to the family LLC would pass to a woman she hasn't spoken to in 5 years because of a fight over a Thanksgiving seating chart. Ron stood up, crossed to the filing cabinet, and returned with another folder. We're going to need to get ahead of this. File a notice of trustee affirmation. Make it clear the 2021 version is in force and active. I'll submit it today. That alone should stall any emergency hearing. I flipped through the trust again, my eyes scanning over my own signature. There was something visceral about seeing your name in ink on a page that quietly guarded you from the knife your own family had been sharpening. Do they even know Mary Ann is the alternate? I doubt it. That name was added in the amendment, not the original doc. Unless they requested the updated trust from the registrar's office, and you didn't authorize that, there's no reason they'd have seen it. I looked up at him. We need to keep it that way. Understood. I left his office a different man. Not calm, not yet, but no longer prey, because suddenly the game had flipped. Their entire plot hinged on the assumption that, once I was removed as trustee, Catherine would slide in and start signing checks. That she'd control Langston Holdings. That Matt would be ushered in as a shadow CEO, overseeing a company he hadn't even earned a middle manager badge for. But if that medical declaration goes through now, Mary Ann becomes the power of record. And if there's one thing Mary Ann hates more than sloppy accounting, it's people who think they're smarter than the rules. And Catherine once called her a boring little pencil witch. So now, I had a trigger. All I had to do was let them think they were winning. Let them continue building the bonfire, piling up logs of false evidence and manipulated testimonies. And then, right as they lit the match, I'd hand them the clause that burns it all down. But first, I had one more thing to confirm. Something that had been scratching at the back of my brain since I saw that forged doctor's note. A name. Landon Pierce. Ron didn't know it yet, but we were about to call a ghost. The first time I heard the name, Dr. Landon Pierce, it was on page 3 of the guardianship filing, nestled between two lines of medical jargon they clearly hoped would blur together into something authoritative. A single paragraph, in clinical font, stated that Dr. Pierce, having personally evaluated Mr. Langston on 2 occasions, finds signs of early-stage cognitive decline consistent with age-related impairment and recommends guardianship. Except I've never met the man. And I don't forget a face, especially not one who would have had to sit across from me, clip a pin to his lab coat, and use phrases like, "Let's do a quick memory test," while pretending not to already know the verdict. I handed the document to Ron. Who the hell is this guy? Ron tilted his glasses down, eyes narrowing. He's not your primary physician? Never heard of him. That was all Ron needed to hear. He spun in his chair, opened his laptop, and began digging. 5 minutes later, he muttered, "Unbelievable. Ed, this guy hasn't practiced since 2019. According to the state's licensing database, he retired 4 years ago. His medical license is listed as inactive. So who signed this evaluation?" Ron pulled up a scanned version of the form, enlarged the signature block, and zoomed in until the screen was more ink than words. "I don't know," he said slowly. "But this isn't his writing. Look at the baseline on the signature. Shaky, inconsistent. It was traced or forged. Badly." He picked up the phone and called the number listed on the filing. A receptionist answered, overly chipper. "Hello, Dr. Pierce's office, though we're technically retired now. This is Monica." Ron's voice flattened. "Hi, Monica. This is Ronald Trask, attorney for Edward Langston. We're reviewing a guardianship petition that claims Dr. Pierce performed a recent cognitive evaluation. Can you confirm the doctor has seen Mr. Langston?" "Mr. Langston?" she repeated. "That name doesn't ring any bells. Hang on, let me check." A pause. Tapping keys. Another pause. "Nope. Dr. Pierce hasn't taken new patients since 19, and we keep everything in our digital log. I can guarantee he hasn't done any evaluations in at least 4 years. He mostly just plays golf now." Ron thanked her, hung up, and immediately opened a new folder on his desktop labeled Forgery Case. "This changes everything," he said, because now it wasn't just a shady guardianship bid. Now we had a fabricated medical evaluation, a forged signature from a doctor who hadn't touched a stethoscope in years. And it wasn't a small technicality. In guardianship filings, the medical evaluation is the spine of the entire petition. Without it, everything collapses. I tried to imagine the scene. Catherine and Matt, hunched over a dining table late at night, printing forms, tracing signatures, giggling like conspirators in a suburban noir. Did they even know Dr. Pierce was retired? Or were they just sloppy enough to pick a name from some template site and hope no one checked? It didn't matter, because now we had something they couldn't bury under family loyalty or crocodile tears. We had criminal behavior. Ron called in a handwriting expert he'd worked with before, a crusty ex-FBI guy named Doyle. wore suspenders, and smelled like pipe smoke even though he didn't smoke. He spent an hour comparing the signature on the guardianship petition with old samples of Pierce's handwriting pulled from public medical records. Finally, Doyle pointed at the screen with a pencil. See that loop in the capital L? That's not Pierce's hand. And the angle of the P is wrong. It slants left, not forward. Someone tried to imitate his style, but didn't understand the biomechanics of his writing. In English, please, I said. It's fake, Doyle snapped. An amateur fake. Ron nodded, already typing. This gets filed with the response. Immediate grounds to motion for dismissal. And once we file a fraud claim, the court won't just throw out the petition. They'll start asking very uncomfortable questions. I leaned back in the chair. My head was swimming with possibilities. This wasn't just defense anymore. This was offense. We weren't just stopping their plan. We were now one step ahead, building a paper wall they couldn't climb. But time was tight. The hearing was in 4 business days. If the judge saw the forged evaluation before we flagged it, we'd be stuck reacting, denying something that already poisoned the water. We needed the motion filed before their documents were even reviewed. Preemptive. Surgical. File it, I said. Tonight. Ron looked up. That'll force their lawyer's hand. He'll either try to withdraw the petition quietly, or double down and risk going down with them. Let him. Because if there's one thing I know from running a company for 40 years, it's this. When people start falsifying records, they've already lost the moral high ground. All that's left is to make sure they lose everything else just as quietly. The numbers didn't lie. They never do. I've lived my whole life by ledgers, by margins, by decimal points that built the kind of quiet legacy you don't need to post on Instagram to be proud of. But these numbers weren't proud. They were surgical, calculated, hidden like rot beneath drywall. It started when Ron said, let's audit everything. Assume nothing. So we did. He handed me access to an internal financial forensics team, guys who could find a missing dime in a landfill. We gave them full discretion, all personal accounts, all business ties, trusts, cards, digital wallets, even the little things like Amazon and Venmo. It took 48 hours. 3 checking accounts, all open in my name, none of which I had ever touched. Not once. They weren't even at my main bank. They were spread across regional online banks that specialized in low-barrier openings. All 3 had similar activity patterns, large initial deposits, followed by multiple small withdrawals. The amounts were just low enough not to trigger any of the usual alerts. 10,000 here, 12,000 there, 8,000 split in 3s. At first glance, it looked like ordinary financial noise, until the analyst zoomed in and pointed at the origin of the logins. Sir, he said carefully, all 3 were created using an email address not listed on your personal or business domains. It's a Gmail. Here's the kicker. It's the same email address listed as the contact on your wife's yoga studio website. I said nothing. Just watched the cursor blink on the screen like it was daring me to say this was a mistake. It wasn't. Ron asked the analyst to trace the debit cards linked to those accounts. Each card was tied to a shared online wallet, one that linked to another card, used exclusively by my son. Everything looped. Quietly. Efficiently. The funds went from me to accounts in my name, and then out through a network of cards controlled by Catherine and Matt. They were laundering my own damn money to prepare for a world where I had no signature authority. Ron muttered. This wasn't just precaution. They were preparing for a handoff. Once the guardianship was granted, they'd consolidate everything and freeze you out. I stared at the spreadsheet. One transaction stood out. $4, 500 wired from one of the ghost accounts to a boutique law office I'd never heard of. What's that? I asked. The analyst replied. They specialize in probate and estate restructuring. One of their senior partners gave a TED Talk last year titled Planning for Incapacity. Of course he did. And here's the part that really gutted me. Not the money, not the tactics, but the precision. This wasn't a sloppy smash and grab. This was a chess match, and they'd studied my every move, every preference. They knew I never touched online banking unless absolutely necessary. They knew I let Catherine handle the household bills. They knew Matt had helped me once, with a wire transfer and stored that access like a seed he planned to water later. That was the quiet hurt. The realization that every kindness I'd extended, every ounce of trust I'd handed over like an aging patriarch trying to show faith in his legacy, they'd filed those moments away, cataloged them, and turned them into weapons. I stood and walked to the window in Ron's office. The city lights blurred through the glass. The skyline looked exactly how I felt. Familiar, but wrong. Tilted. Crooked. Freeze the accounts, I said. Ron nodded. We'll need to move carefully. If they get wind of this too early, they'll start cleaning trails. Then don't freeze them outright. Flag them. Shadow them. Let's see where the money wants to go next. He raised an eyebrow. Going fishing? No, I said. I'm baiting the trap. Because now that I knew how deep this went, I wasn't going to just stop the bleeding. I wanted the scalpel they used to cut me out. I wanted it labeled, bagged, and presented in court under fluorescent lights while they squirmed in their seats. Catherine once joked at a dinner party that she could never get away with cheating because Ed knows where every cent lives. She had no idea how true that still was. I never imagined a piece of paper could make my pulse spike harder than a heart attack. But there it was, black and white, signed and filed, a new beneficiary designation form for my $2.5 million life insurance policy. And the beneficiary? Not Catherine. Not a split between Catherine and Matt. Not a trust for the grandkids. Just one name, Matthew S. Langston. My son. Soul. Ron and I found it buried in the back end of the insurance portal. We had just finished flagging the bank accounts when he asked if I had reviewed any recent changes to my estate plans. I shook my head. Catherine handles that, I said. A reflex. One I immediately regretted. He gave me a look. Ed, she's trying to legally bury you. Let's stop pretending she's still mailing holiday cards. We logged in using credentials I hadn't touched in 3 years. And there it was, quietly submitted and processed exactly 93 days ago. Just inside the quiet contestability window most carriers honor without notifying the insured. Ron enlarged the PDF. This is the submission form. Your name, your policy number, and what appears to be your signature. It wasn't mine. Not even close. The handwriting was close enough to fool a casual glance. But there were details. The curvature of the L in Langston. The slight upward kick in my lowercase t. Absent. Replaced by a straight-line imitation with all the grace of a drunk in turn forging a sick note. Whoever did this, Ron said slowly, had access to an old form of yours and tried to copy it. Can we prove it's a forgery? We don't have to yet, he said. Not unless they try to collect. And that's when it hit me. Not the theft, not the signature, not even the insult of being reduced to a number on a payout line. The implication. Because this wasn't just theft. This was motive. This was planning a future without me in it. You don't quietly reassign a life insurance policy unless you're building toward an event where that money becomes available. I'm not imagining things, I said. Ron didn't answer. I'm not being paranoid. They're not just taking control. They're preparing for my absence. He still didn't speak. Say something, I snapped. Finally, he exhaled. I don't think they go that far, Ed. But you don't move all these pieces unless you're willing to let something happen. I stood, pacing. My heartbeat felt like it was trying to punch through my ribs. This wasn't about a company, or power of attorney, or a few side accounts to skim money off the top. This was in-game planning. And I'd missed every single signal because it had been masked in smiles and casserole dishes and fake concern about my sleep schedule. Ron dialed a direct line to the insurance provider's compliance department. He explained the situation in measured tones, referencing the forged medical evaluation and the bank account irregularities. They froze the beneficiary change immediately. I want an official investigation, I said. And I want that request filed in writing. Today. Ron nodded. We'll get sworn statements from handwriting experts, too. Make it airtight. But I was barely listening. My mind had already leapt forward, through a maze of probabilities and shadowed rooms. Through every moment when Catherine made me tea without asking. When Matt offered to pick something up for me from the pharmacy. When they insisted on me joining them for that wellness retreat last month that I skipped last minute. Had I already dodged something? A dose? A fall? A staged accident? Or were they just laying the groundwork so that, if something did happen, a stroke, a heart attack, a car that mysteriously swerved, they'd be the ones picking up the pieces and the check? It didn't matter. Because now the illusion was gone. The question wasn't if they were trying to take me out of the equation. It was how soon they planned to do it. I returned to my seat. My voice felt distant in my own ears. No more delays. I want every point of vulnerability sealed. Trust. Accounts. Business proxies. Power of attorney. Title deeds. Everything. I want a firewall built around me, so high they can't breathe near it. Ron didn't blink. You're thinking preemptive lockout. I'm thinking war. He nodded once and got to work. And I finally understood what this had always been. Not a betrayal. A succession plan. One where the only thing missing was a funeral. It was supposed to be roast chicken, not a crucifixion. 3 days after we uncovered the forged medical evaluation, the ghost accounts, and the doctored life insurance policy, Ron got a quiet phone call from someone inside the county clerk's office. Not official, not on record, just a whisper across a coffee cup from someone who owed him a favor. "She'll be there," the voice said. "Sunday evening. Family court liaison. Going in under a scheduled wellness visit." Ron hung up, looked at me, and said, "You were never supposed to leave that dinner alive." I blinked. What? Not dead. Not physically, but dead in terms of autonomy. That dinner was the setup. They'd arranged for a court-appointed liaison to be present. Catherine filed it under a routine check tied to the guardianship petition. They were going to film you, Ed. Not with hidden cameras. Openly. Documenting the home environment, they'd say. You show up confused, you lose. You show up angry, you lose. You act like yourself, but you ask questions, they mark it as aggression. You so much as hesitate on a date or forget the wine you brought. That becomes evidence. I sat still. The room got smaller. All those smiles. The casual, bring that Cabernet you like. Catherine's little reminder that I always forgot it was Laura's birthday, even though I never had. Matt calling me that morning just to say he was so glad we could still do things as a family. All of it was rehearsal. They weren't just planning to steal my name. They were planning to stage my decline. We pulled up the dinner invitation text. The timestamp was curious. Sent 2 days before the guardianship filing, but edited since. Catherine had added a new line. My friend Lori might swing by. She's taking a counseling course. Wants to observe how families interact around elder care. Hope that's okay. Ron read it, snorted. Lori's not a student. She's a licensed court liaison. She's handled at least 3 guardianship recommendations this year alone. The trap was elegant. Weaponized domestic routine. Frame the old man in his natural habitat, then spin his questions as signs of decline. And if he caught on, that's just further proof he's paranoid. I canceled the dinner with a single sentence. Feeling under the weather. Let's reschedule. Catherine responded within seconds. Oh no, nothing serious I hope. Should we drop off some soup? Soup. Jesus. Matt didn't reply at all. Instead, that evening, a call came from the liaison herself. Voicemail. Soft, professional, rehearsed. Hi, Mr. Langston. I was informed by your family that you weren't feeling well. I just wanted to touch base and see if you'd be comfortable rescheduling our little wellness visit. No pressure, just part of the guardianship process. Feel free to call me back. She said guardianship like it was a dental cleaning. Routine. Clean. Sanitized. Ron and I drafted a response that same night. Nothing hostile, just a formal acknowledgement of contact and a notice that all future interactions must go through legal counsel. It was enough to halt any informal visits without triggering suspicion. But something shifted after that. Catherine started texting less. Matt went silent. Even their attorney, who had previously been sending confident, bullet-pointed updates to Ron, suddenly went quiet. They're regrouping, Ron said. They know something's wrong. They just don't know what yet. Which was perfect. Because suspicion, when it festers in the dark, breeds mistakes. I began checking the security cameras around the house more often. The ones they assumed I never figured out how to use. I replaced the outdoor locks with models that sent push notifications. I reviewed my medication bottles again. One label looked off, just barely. A different font. A different bottle manufacturer. I sent it to a lab Ron trusted. The report came back. Trace amounts of lorazepam. A sedative. Prescribed in microdoses for anxiety or to create confusion. It wasn't paranoia. It was a campaign. Silent. Measured. Almost beautiful in its precision. And now it was mine to expose. Catherine once told me the secret to a good dinner party was layering. A little wine, soft music, conversation that escalates just enough to feel real. She said, people don't remember the food. They remember how you made them feel. She's about to find out how I make people feel when I'm no longer on the menu. For weeks, it felt like I was walking through a world tilted just slightly off-center. Every face familiar, every voice warm. But behind it all, calculations. Catherine's soft-spoken reassurances. Matt's sudden concern for my sleep habits. Even the dog had started acting funny around me. Paranoia had no edges anymore. It bled into everything. But then, out of nowhere, I got a call that changed everything. Not from Ron. Not from one of his analysts. From her. Eddie? It's Claire. Claire. My cousin. Older by 4 years. Former paralegal. Retired, twice divorced. Sharp as broken glass in a velvet glove. We hadn't spoken in maybe a year, and even then, only in passing. A wedding or a funeral, I can't remember which. But I knew her voice. Always slightly amused, like she was in on a joke no one else had figured out yet. I've been meaning to call, but, well, something's come up. I think I might have seen something I wasn't supposed to." She explained that a few months back, she'd taken on a short contract at a legal support firm downtown. Small, third-party operation that handled filing, couriering, and prepping basic forms for law offices around the county. Harmless work, mostly. Until one day, a set of guardianship papers came through for processing. She recognized the names immediately: Langston, Edward; Langston, Catherine; Langston, Matthew. She remembered thinking, that can't be my cousin Eddie. He's sharp as a tack. But what stuck with her wasn't just the names. It was the handwriting. There were handwritten notes on the margins, she said. Someone had corrected a field, something to do with dates on the medical evaluation. And I thought to myself, why the hell would a doctor be writing in gel pen? It wasn't professional. She didn't think much of it at the time. People scribble on filings all the time. But when she heard through mutual family channels that I'd abruptly missed a Sunday dinner, and that Catherine had been worried about my memory again, her antenna went up. So she pulled the original drafts from the firm's scan archive, took a photo, waited. Then last night, she saw something on the news about adult guardianship fraud in a neighboring county, some elder law nightmare involving a forged will and a bank manager, and she made the connection. I compared the handwriting, she said. And I know this sounds insane, Eddie, but I swear to you, I recognize it. It's Catherine's. I didn't speak. Just sat there, staring at my phone, pressing the receiver so hard into my ear I felt the plastic imprinting my skin. I'll testify, she said. Swear on the record. Whatever you need. We met in Ron's office the next day. Claire walked in wearing a turtleneck and no makeup, holding a folder full of printed email confirmations and internal firm memos. She sat down, opened it with that same amused smirk she wore at funerals, and handed Ron a sheet. This is a timestamp from the firm's internal server. Document was uploaded at 10:43 a.m. This, she flipped to another page, is a photo of the original, before it was converted to PDF and sent to the court. See that margin note? Ron squinted. That looped Y. It's distinctive. It is, Claire said, because Catherine dots her I's with a tiny circle. Not a dot. A circle. Like a 13-year-old girl who never grew out of bubble lettering. I used to tease her about it in college. Ron looked at me. This is your smoking gun. We filed the motion to dismiss on the grounds of material fraud. Claire's affidavit went in with it. So did the expert report on the forged doctor's signature. And the insurance file. And the flagged accounts. We didn't tip our hand completely. Just enough to put the judge on notice. Just enough to make sure their petition wouldn't slide through uncontested like they'd planned. They didn't know yet. Catherine still sent me a text that night. Hope you're feeling better. We missed you at dinner. Let me know when you want to reschedule. Matt sent nothing. His silence was starting to become its own kind of confession. But the real shift came the next morning, when Ron received a brief email from their attorney. Just 2 lines. Requesting continuance on behalf of clients. Need to review new information. Ron turned the monitor toward me. They're panicking. They still think I'm guessing, I said. Ron smiled grimly. They have no idea you're already swinging the axe. Because this wasn't defense anymore. This was the beginning of the siege. They walked in like winners. Catherine wore that steel gray pantsuit she saves for funerals and fundraisers, clothes that say, I grieve, but professionally. Her hair was pinned just a little too tightly, like she wanted to convince the courtroom her life was equally pulled together. Matt trailed behind her, looking like the understudy for a man he didn't fully understand. Slim-fit suit, nervous smile, a folder tucked under his arm like a schoolboy pretending to be CFO. Their lawyer, some sleek junior partner from a firm that once tried to poach my COO, strutted in first, nodding like the outcome was already a done deal. He didn't even glance at me. We were the first case on the docket. Langston versus Langston, petition for adult guardianship due to cognitive decline. Ron leaned in and whispered, This is where they expect you to stammer. Don't. I didn't. The judge was an older man, mid-60s, white beard, still wore reading glasses like he didn't trust digital screens. Good. He'd respect paper. Catherine's lawyer stood and launched into his monologue. A soft, polished dirge, out of love and concern, consistent patterns of forgetfulness, increasing emotional volatility. The words flowed like a sermon, almost soothing, if you didn't know what they were meant to mask. He cited the medical evaluation. He referenced financial irregularities. He even had the gall to mention inappropriate responses to familial gestures of care. I sat still, silent, listening to the eulogy they'd written for me while I was still alive. Then it was Ron's turn. No theatrics, no shouting, just one word, exhibits. He laid them out methodically. Exhibit A. The original medical evaluation, allegedly signed by Dr. Landon Pierce, followed by a notarized letter from the man himself, stating under penalty of perjury that he had never met me and had been retired since 2019. Exhibit B. Forensic handwriting analysis confirming the signature was forged. Exhibit C. My $2.5 million life insurance policy, with the altered beneficiary form and a statement from the insurer freezing the change due to fraud. Exhibit D. A series of flagged bank statements tracing money from shell accounts in my name back to joint cards used by Catherine and Matt, annotated by a certified forensic accountant. And then came Exhibit E, the dagger, a signed, sworn affidavit from my cousin Claire, the retired paralegal, detailing the chain of custody of the original filings, her identification of Catherine's handwriting, and a time-stamped copy of the draft with handwritten margin notes in bubble-dotted IS. The courtroom was silent. The judge flipped through the exhibits one by one. Slowly, deliberately, Catherine shifted. Matt coughed. Their attorney's face, once a billboard of corporate smugness, began to twitch. Finally, the judge set the papers down and looked straight at him. You advised them to proceed with this? Silence. Sir, the judge pressed. I'm asking, did you knowingly allow a petition based on fraudulent documentation to be submitted to this court? Their attorney blinked. Once, then turned to Catherine and Matt, his mouth twitching open like a man just realizing he'd boarded the wrong flight at the wrong terminal. I withdraw as counsel, Your Honor. Gasps. Whispers. Catherine's nails clenched white around the edge of the table. The judge nodded. Guardianship petition is denied. Indefinitely. And I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into possible fraud, elder abuse, and financial misconduct. Catherine made a choking sound. Matt finally looked at me, for the first time in weeks. His eyes didn't hold guilt. Not really. Just panic. The panic of someone who's realizing the chessboard didn't belong to him after all. I met his stare. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. Outside, reporters weren't waiting. No one was. It wasn't that kind of scandal. But as they stood huddled in the hallway with their ex-lawyer furiously whispering into a burner phone, I walked past them without a word. No shouting. No triumph. Just gravity. Like a man walking away from the funeral they thought they planned for him. The house was quiet that night. Not peaceful. Just quiet in that specific way things get when the last illusion has died and there's nothing left to pretend for. No casserole in the oven. No jazz humming from the Bluetooth speaker Catherine insisted made the kitchen feel more alive. Just stillness. Dense. Like the walls were watching me, waiting for what I'd do next. I sat in my den, the room everyone forgot existed until tax season. Same room where I'd written the original Langston Holdings charter. Same place I'd taught Matt how to read a balance sheet when he was 10, before he decided being clever was more important than being principled. The scotch was older than his career. I poured one glass. Neat. No ice. Tonight didn't need dilution. My laptop hummed as it woke up. The desktop still had a photo of us, Catherine, Matt, me, and our granddaughter, taken at the lake house last summer. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Not for nostalgia. Just to study it. Like I was trying to understand the moment it all began to rot. I opened the trusty dashboard for Langston Holdings. Two-factor authentication. Biometric scan. Password known only to me and, until now, the family I thought deserved it. One by one, I pulled up the access logs. Matt's credentials, revoked. Catherine's administrative privileges, revoked. Their linked email recovery options, wiped. A digital signature was required to finalize the authority transfer. I used it. Then I opened the master trust. The one that governed everything. The company, the estate, the legacy. One click opened the beneficiaries tab. It still listed Matt at 40%. Catherine at 25%. I removed them both. Not because I was angry. That would have been easier. Anger makes things loud. Anger wants to be seen. This was different. This was surgical. They had tried to erase me. Methodically. Painlessly, if they had their way. A legal euthanasia of identity dressed up in concern and soft-spoken betrayal. Now they were the ones being erased. Not out of rage. Out of necessity. There was one last thing to do. I opened my phone. Typed a message. No salutation. No guilt. Just the truth, in the only tone that still fit. You should have waited. I was going to give you the company, when you were ready. I hit send. No ... typing bubbles appeared. I didn't expect any. I stared at the screen for a moment longer, then powered off the phone and dropped it into the drawer next to the insurance papers they tried to bury me with. The fireplace ticked as the last embers settled. My glass sat untouched, but I felt something loosen in my chest. Not peace exactly. Peace was naive. This was something colder, sharper. The final click of a door closing behind me, locking from me inside. They were gone. Not in some dramatic, headline-making way. There would be no arrests, no public disgrace. Just silence. Just absence. The slow, grinding removal of their influence from every corner of my life. Matt would check his login tomorrow morning and find nothing. Catherine would call our attorney and get a polite redirect to external counsel. And me? I'd still be here. In the same den. With the same glass. With everything they thought I'd hand over now resting quietly, irrevocably, where they couldn't touch it. The story wouldn't be told in court. It didn't need to be. The people who mattered would know. The ones who didn't would forget. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you refuse to give away.